everyone. My name is Benji Carr, and I am the author of Impacted. This is my reading copy here. I started writing this in January of 2018, I believe. I got a sentence stuck in my head that would not leave me alone. I intended to write a flash fiction story about a woman who was having an affair with her dentist that ended somehow tragically. It was going to be flash fiction. It was going to be about 500 to 1,000 words. And I'm really bad at flash fiction, apparently, because it became my first novel. Additionally, I realized that I could not write the perspective of a middle-aged married woman because I am not one and have never been one. And the ones that I know, don't go to dentists. I'm kidding. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't concern myself with their hygiene. What I did realize was that I knew what it was like to be gay, to be closeted, and to have a childhood essentially surrounded by secrets. And I grew up in Beaufort, Georgia, which is in Gwinnett County in Metro Atlanta. And even though we are part of Atlanta, outside of the perimeter is an entirely different mindset. And in addition, oppressive small town cultures can occur anywhere, essentially. So as I started to create the book, I was following noir books like Jim Thompson or Dashiell Hammett. The Big Sleep was a bit of an influence, although that one's not my favorite of the Philip Marlowe. But essentially, I tried to create a cliffhanger-based detective novel without the detective. I don't know if you've read The Big Sleep, but essentially what has happened in The Big Sleep is that there is a rich, drunken party girl who is entirely too young, and she has gotten herself caught up accidentally with a pornographer and book dealer who has taken these racy photos of her. And so in desperation, she just sort of guns him down. And in the process, Philip Marlowe, the detective, comes in and isn't sure which member of the family has committed the murder, since the pornographer was blackmailing every member of the family. I essentially wanted to create a novel from the perspective of like the young, floozy character who's caught up entirely too much in like a scandal and is in over their head. My floozy's name was Wade. And the detective sort of kind of never shows up. Wade I created just sort of amassing any sort of like gossip that I remembered from my childhood. My cousin Brandy, step cousin Brandy, was 16 and pregnant, and they got her to marry her boyfriend at the time, even though he had just graduated high school. And they moved both of them into her father's basement, which he had finished. And it had its own separate doorway so that they had their own apartment with the baby. But essentially, they could go and get grandparents' help whenever they needed it. You had to walk around the house to be able to go into their front door, so that everyone used the same driveway, basically. And so I was like, okay, well, what if there's a teen pregnancy? And like, what if someone's having an affair with a dentist? And what if it's someone who, like me, um, was dealing with sexual abuse and molestation, but they didn't necessarily have a support system or courage to be able to speak about within my own life. So I took those secrets, all of them, and I was like, is it just horribly indulgent and unrealistic to make this all one person? And I was like, okay, well, all right, well, let's try it. Let's just see if we can make one character someone who's having an affair with their dentist, underage and molested, while also coping with teenage pregnancy and living in their mother's basement. And then, because I started, this is one of the weird things that helps of writing something the wrong way. Because I started it as though it were a woman having an affair with her dentist, I realized that when I made it a man having an affair with his dentist, and that there was a baby seat in the rearview mirror of the, like, as he's driving away, all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, how old is this character, and how old does this character want to think he is, which is different. As a survivor of abuse, I know that I coped with a tremendous amount of isolation and self-blame. Victims, survivors of exploitation, survivors of abuse, particularly if they've been conditioned or if they grew up in oppressive circumstances, blame themselves. I blamed myself because I didn't think, when I was 12, 13, when it started happening, I thought that everything that happened to me was something that I had control over, and that no one else would possibly understand or could possibly relate to what it was that I was talking about. And I didn't think that anyone would believe me if I told them. That is one of the tools of abusers. They know that their victims will feel complicit. They know that if they say, well, let's just not tell anyone, that this sort of, that the abuse can continue, that the cycle of abuse can continue, and that there will always be victims so long as we don't speak out about how often this happens and how much this happens to most anyone. Plus, there is a difference in what there is a difference in what sexual violence looks like and how it is depicted in culture. So I remember as a kid thinking, well, that didn't happen to me. Like the thing that happened on that episode of Cagney and Lacey didn't happen to me. So maybe I'm just thinking about it the wrong way. Maybe I'm just not viewing what happened to me the right way. And one thing that happens is you want to keep trying to find a way to disqualify yourself. I'm not gay, I'm just going through a phase. this is just like my feelings are just the result of something that happened to me. And it creates inside of you this just perpetual sense of apology and self-doubt, wherein you're beating yourself up at every single step of the way, and you make a lot of boneheaded decisions because you don't think that there's anything that you can do about it. The protagonist of my book is an idiot, and it was one of the most delightful things to write when I realized that me at 45, I'm 45 now. When I was 43, I was able to look back on this 15, 16-year-old and realize, oh my God, what would happen if I were in these situations when I was that age? And then all of a sudden I'm like, I would have no damn idea what to do. No matter how much TV I watched, I would have no idea what to do. I would go through, I would panic. What if there were cell phones then? Oh my God, that would make it worse. And then as I'm writing everything, I realized that I'd left the phone in the dentist's office, which happens between the first and second chapter. And then and so the way I wrote this, I would take the chapters and I would send them out to friends of mine, just beta readers, because I can't write for myself. I have to have an audience in order to not necessarily know how I'm doing, but to just like I have no sense of self-worth. So so I go to others. I go to my friend Vicky, who's been reading everything I've ever written since I was like 15 years old. And I just sort of was like, should I keep going? That was the only question that I would ask, and the only question that I would allow them to do. The only question I would allow them to essentially make was just, should I keep going? Yes, keep going. Because I didn't want them to like guess what was going to happen in chapter 7 in the middle of chapter 2, or stop me from motivating them as I was writing it. I don't know how much sense this is making. Because I'm talking about process, I'm talking about character creation, I'm talking about internal motivation, and but then the thing is that like I didn't write this with a plan, so everything became about discovery, and my background is in playwriting and drama, so I just sort of tried to create character. Then sit in the mindset of that character, and then think my way through a dentist's office. The couches that I described are like the couches in my doctor's office at like now. And when he left the phone, it was because I had accidentally forgotten to include the phone in the first chapter. And so, because I was just going to have him go home, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, no. And then I started to think, okay, well, if I do this every time, if I write a chapter and then go through and think, okay, well, what did I leave out? What part did I forget? Wait, someone mentioned that the couch delivery is coming. What if that actually happened at the exact wrong moment? And so then the first 6 to 8 chapters go like that. We don't leave him ever, and we don't get any smarter than he is about anything that's happening. And because he has been conditioned, because he's the victim of abuse, he doesn't have an accurate, fair view of himself or his situation at all. At the same time, characters who come along later who think that they can very easily explain away or solve situations for him aren't exactly fair or right either. But that is the nature of, I think, just life and soap opera, is that everybody's just trying to do their best, and it causes us all to destroy one another. Sometimes literally. I've killed no dentists, by the way. In the making of this book, I killed no dentists.
Benji, I think it's fascinating that you started this as, you know, essentially a Marlowe pastiche.
Yeah.
And then you started adding all of the substance to it. And I think this is a fascinating, you know, perspective on real writing versus writing that isn't real. One of my theories is that real writers always write about something, that you can't, that a real writer can never just knock something off. And you know, and I think there's no chance that you would ever have been able to write the thing that you had actually referred to this novel as at one point, which was like, what was it, a gay noir thriller or something like that?
Oh, I referred to it as a Southern gay murder noir.
Yes, that was it.
Yes.
And my response to that was, that would be a terrible injustice to this book.
But it isn't not that.
But that's too reductive. I guess that's the thing.
Well,
you know?
It's the you said that my initial pitch to you when I told you about this novel was terrible, and the reason is because I am not a terribly confident person. And in addition to that, if you attend writing events, or if you know, or if you go to writing classes, or if you go to workshops, everyone always gives you this sense, I mean, it's never clear, but everyone always gives you this sense that there is a right way to go about this. And so I was told that pitches always had to have comp titles, and like you had to know your genre, and you had to know what current titles there also were, and eventually you said to me that the reason that my pitch was terrible was because I had written something kind of original, and I kept trying to describe it as though it were something else.
Yeah, I mean, just to let everybody else know, I mean, you know, Benji, you know, pitched me this novel, and I thought, sounds kind of generic. and then at the Broadleaf Writers Conference, there's a session
First pages,
where a panel of people with opinions,
professionals.
Yeah, right, something like that. I argue at that point, considering some of the people I shared that panel with.
But I used air quotes.
but the panel judges the first page, literally the first page. So if it ends in the middle of a sentence, that's where it stops. Of a group of stories, and one of them was the first page from Impacted, and I was blown out of the water. And then I found out that this was the thing that he was talking about. And I was just kind of stunned, because that seemed brilliant and the pitch was not. So.
Well,
but I do think, I mean, that's a whole other story. I mean, I'm much more interested in how you go from, you know, because I've actually heard that musicians do this also, that they'll say, I'm going to write a song like Little Richard. And then they bring all of themselves to it. And in the end, it doesn't sound in any way like Little Richard, but it sounds like genius. And I think you were doing a very similar thing, I'm going to build this on a bunch of noir fiction. And by the time I brought everything that actually matters to me into the story, it was genius, but it was not noir fiction anymore.
Right. That's the, well, I mean, the sentence that got stuck in my head was when I started to write this, the sentence that got stuck in my head, it was actually just a phrase. I kept thinking, because she couldn't unfuck her dentist. she had to figure another way out. And then I thought of that as a potential first sentence, and then I'm like, okay, well, that would cause the majority of agents and publishers to like throw it across the room, potentially, particularly at Zondervan or something like that. But a lot of the first page of the book functions like a puzzle. And some people get it and some people don't. It essentially is just someone sitting in a car waiting for their date to come out from their office. And the guy sitting in the car is just sort of puzzling over how he got here and what to do about it. He's been waiting for a while. And there's a whole lot of slow build. And then the sentence comes in the end of the second paragraph, I believe. Because Wade couldn't unfuck his dentist or reverse his Prius down the road to hell he'd been traveling for 2 months, he had to come up with another solution. I drive a Prius. It doesn't make noise. It's blue. And I find myself, when motivated or unmotivated, sitting in parking lots just a whole lot. The thing is, I'm a little lost. I just tried writing about something that wasn't me. I tried writing just an exercise in genre. And then I realized in order to write realistically, I had to, or with a sense of grounded emotional realism, I had to at least be able to relate my own experience to the stresses of what the character was going through. And it wasn't until I think it takes 5 chapters for you to find out everything about Wade to keep this picture in your mind and have it be an accurate one versus an inaccurate one. But once I realized how much of this was going to have to go through my own personal experience, it was terrifying. But then I also know from live storytelling on stage and from doing short fiction that you have to have a certain amount of distance between when something happened to you and when you're able to talk about it. It took me 30 years to be able to address aspects of the trauma that I went through as a child, and have it come out in a way that made sense and felt at least a little confident that I knew what I was talking about. But then in addition to that, as I had written it and then had finished it, I was fairly certain that I had gotten everything about surviving trauma and coping with sexual abuse and exploitation wrong. I was fairly certain that I had gotten everything wrong and that someone else was going to come along and tell me all the ways in which I didn't understand the experience, like my own experience, and or ways in which that I had essentially written a cliched novel like Death in Venice or something like we've already seen the young man exploited by the older influence, or like that I'd written Lolita, and that people just shouldn't do that anymore because the I don't know if you've seen it. You get the sense that somehow people now believe that by representing actual trauma in culture, that you're just perpetuating trauma rather than trying to introduce it into conversation and find a way to use it to reflect the bad things that are going on in the actual world. And you have to be daring, clumsy, bold, and mistaken, or be willing to. You have to be willing to fail, but be honest, in order to be able to write a book like what I wrote. And Lou will tell you that I still, on most days, won't admit that I actually did anything worthwhile. But I'm grateful that you are all here.
Want to ask some questions now for the discussion questions?
Oh, sure. You told me to get 10 minutes ready and I got nervous, and now I'm looking at the time and it's like, oh God.
Oh, that was great.
Was it though? And all right.
I think the only problem is you probably answered all the questions.
Yes. Well, I also wrote, I think, most of the questions. So
Yeah.
Well, let's ask some of the other attendees if they have any questions.
Well, I always start blabbing, and I do have some questions, but first I just have to say that I am so fascinated by what you thought you were writing, because as I was reading this book, it never once entered my mind that this was noir. This was a neon bright story for me. It was gonzo. I tend to think of noir fiction as dark and narrow and very tight, and this was just like which is the exact antithesis. So I'm listening to you saying this and saying, except that I'm also a writer, and I know that what we write, we don't always realize. There's sometimes a huge, very large synapse between us, one nerve, and the ultimate result, that we don't always make that connection ourselves. But hey, if you thought you wrote a noir, who am I to argue? I thought it was hilarious. And I did have one big question though, and that was, why did the mother put the teeth in the box going to Wade's girlfriend? Why didn't they just throw out the teeth? I kept thinking the girlfriend, I can't remember her name, and her minister father, Jessa, thank you. They're going to be unpacking this box, and they're going to find this orthodontic mold in the box, and what will happen then? So I'm wondering if you can address that a little. This haunted me. You should know.
Here,
all the rest of the book. Oh my God, the teeth are in the box. Oh my God. Okay.
So, all right. So first of all, Mary knows that they are not actually investigating a murder. But she also knows that Jessa has threatened to take away the baby, has threatened to take away Liddy, and is sort of saying that Wade is abusive, even though Wade himself is not necessarily he's not a good parent, but and Mary just wants that insurance, essentially, because she realizes that Jessa was at the hospital, even though Jessa never met the dentist. Jessa knows nothing about the affair between Wade and the dentist. And that if, for whatever reason, anyone ever did investigate a murder, if they threw away the teeth or they buried the teeth, that it could potentially be traced back to Wade and then back to Mary. But Jessa killing her ex-boyfriend's boyfriend has its own motivation. It also meant that if anybody goes to jail, then Jessa does, which means that the baby goes back to Wade. And in addition, Mary just doesn't like her. and it was, I think I was thinking of things economically, like otherwise Jessa is sort of an annoying side character who's there to provide complication but isn't tied to the central crime. And I was like, wait a second, if we tie her to the central crime just in the end, my friend Jessica Nettles, who was one of my beta readers, she's like, well, wait, what are they going to do with the teeth? Are they just going to like clean them or throw them away? What are they going to do? And I'm like, well, you remember the box on the porch, right? And she's like, yeah, but what about that? Like, they're just going to come and pick that up. And I'm like, no, the box is on the porch for a reason. And she's like, wait, what? And my friend Jessica hates her son's girlfriend. And all of a sudden, when she realized what I had done and why I had done it, was like, oh my God, that's delicious.
Yeah.
Yes. It's just sort of like you set up the dominoes and then you knock the dominoes down. And the thing that would then tie Jessa, who's not been part of the crime at all, into the crime is to make her the scapegoat should anyone ever investigate. And the reason is because Jessa threatened to take the baby away. And it's because I'm just a vindictive asshole. But anyway.
Did anyone else have any other questions?
Well, I thought the teeth going to Jessa was brilliant. I thought that was really
Thank you.
entertaining. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, that could work. And I felt Jessa deserved to go to jail for the murder. I mean, she's a bitch. I just couldn't wrap my head around her at all as someone that had any reason to exist on this earth. I have a sister-in-law just like her, so that might be part of it. But the strongest thing to me was, and the most powerful thing about the whole book was the final scene when he goes to see the shrink, and she asks him, "What is it you want?" And I thought, oh my God, he grew up. He's got an ounce of intelligence here. He knows what he needs. And I loved it. I can't imagine very many 16-year-olds coming up with such a brilliant result, but it was very satisfying as a reader.
Thank you.
Across.
When I realized where it was going to end, I got kind of upset because I had already decided that writing anything other than a terrible date between he and Trevor, or where then Trevor doesn't message him back or write him back. Like, Trevor's too good for where Wade is right then. Yeah. And Wade isn't in a place to really be healthy with anyone. And his mother sets the appointment. And yet then he starts to try and gain control or agency over any of this situation rather than have his mom solve it, which he still doesn't know about, by the way. He doesn't know the extent of what she did, and she didn't tell him. But that was that was a step I was comfortable with him taking in order to be able to be like, okay, I left him better than I found him.
Mm.
And to get a sense that he has to, it's his story. I mean, and then, and eventually, the way in which we survive trauma, or we at least try to take ownership over ourselves to try and get ourselves out of situations without bashing anyone over the head. And that's where I wanted to leave him. I also didn't give him any scenes of like connection with the baby until the very end,
Mm-hmm.
because he eventually has to take ownership over the world, and he has to take ownership over his situation and his place in the world. And that's why it ended the way that it did.
I have another question, and this is looking into his future a little. Will he ever know that he is not the one who murdered the dentist? His mother's the one who murdered the dentist ultimately.
Okay, so all right. This is this one's fun for me. I was shocked and appalled by Mary and her choices and her actions by the end of it. I was completely and totally convinced that there was no way that she would do this and then not tell him, because she's trying to absolve him of the situation. She's trying to fix the situation for him. And all of a sudden I realized as I was having it happen, Wade can't be trusted with secrets for shit. He kept the teeth. He put the teeth into a cabinet thinking that like no one would look there. And his mom knows immediately where all of his secrets are. And then in addition to that, he then blabs constantly to people and is trusting them because he's already involved like Celeste, who's just some woman who left a voicemail. Like, and so then I realized, for the sake of her own safety and the sake of her own family, and just as a matter of like the whole reason why she did the insolent, like the whole reason is to protect everyone from this. And the only way to protect everyone from this, and also a little bit to keep Wade in line, is to not tell him. And I don't know, maybe he finds out when he's like 45 after thinking of himself as a murderer for 30 or so years. And I was fine with him having like potential residual trauma, because honestly, if you're trying to get away with this, you don't tell Wade. Wade can't even keep his lies straight. Like, that's my father. Oh, my father's in the hospital. Oh, no, he wasn't really my father. Wait, what? Yeah. Anyway.
Well, it was an interesting twist because, again, I'm still digesting your claim that you were inspired by noir fiction. But, here's a story where you're rooting for the villains. And I didn't see Mary I saw Mary as a very protective mother. I mean, maybe because I'm a mommy, but she was just going to go to the ends of the earth to protect her baby, her son. Although when you do point out that she's denying him the opportunity to take responsibility and grow up, but still, I was in her corner because, again, that's what mothers do for their children. But in a noir detective story, you're rooting for the detective to solve the crime, and in your book, I was rooting for nobody ever to solve the crime. And there was a sense the ultimate justice. I mean, in a mystery, the justice is that the criminal is caught and the crime is solved. In your book, the justice is that this ghastly, horrible, evil dentist is dead and no one ever has to take the blame for it. No one ever has to get punished for it. So,
Well, there's my entry into noir and my entry into genre crime fiction was actually didn't start with Dashiell Hammett, didn't start with detective novels. It started with Jim Thompson and The Killer Inside Me and Population 1280, which is about corrupt police officers committing murders all throughout their town and then covering it up by essentially cold-blooded killing everyone else who might potentially figure it out or be involved. And those are still noir to me. They just and those were the crime fighters who were the ones who were just corrupt. So I tried to. I like the sense of scrambling desperation. I think it motivates the narrative. If it puts you as a reader into the mindset of someone who is struggling with something and is over their head, and just sort of throws you into the middle of it. I like that, particularly when then they would do something that I myself personally, as a moral person, would never do. Because that is part of the function of fiction and storytelling, isn't it? To give us emotional experiences and catharses that we wouldn't get otherwise. Like to give you, my mother used to ask me, and this part of this came out in the book actually. My own mother used to ask me, she's like, well, no wonder you're depressed. You watch all of these like horribly depressing movies. Like I was watching like Dogma 95 and The Celebration, things like that. And I'm like, well, but Mom, you read murder mysteries and you've killed no one. And I did a variation on that when I was with the Celeste chapter, and then Celeste's mother, like she read all these Harlequin romance novels, but was never able to like find a decent romance. What we do as writers and what we do as storytellers, we try to let people know that I am a disabled person, but I can't describe what my experience as a disabled person is. I can't show you what that's like. I can tell you what that's like. And if you've been sick before or felt like an outsider before, then you can connect. And then in addition to that, you can relate, and hopefully we all become better, more compassionate people as a result. And there's a fun in it also that I found with fiction, is that like you can create thoroughly bizarre people who you wouldn't want to sit next to and make people like hold their hand to the fire with them, and it's cruel and delightful. Are there any other questions?
Well, I had gone back to the psychologist. I think it's pretty apparent that Wade is going to tell her that he killed the dentist at some point. And what are the ramifications for that in Georgia?
I am not sure, because it didn't occur to me that he would tell her.
Oh
Or
no,
it didn't.
I've been having nightmares since finishing the book.
Well, no, but in addition to
Absolutely
that,
gonna tell her.
but wait a second. Also, the police are not investigating it. And
Yeah.
at the point where he hits the dentist lives.
Yeah.
And then if they investigated it further, Potentially,
can.
they can, and they could, but then they can't because
Because he was cremated, so they're
he
not
was
gonna find
cremated, so
it.
and they're not going to be able to have a toxicology.
Yeah.
And then there's no phone anymore. Oh gosh, you just created something that I didn't see. Oh no.
I mean, the only thing you've got is a body of evidence in that you've got Celeste could bring forward all of the boys that he's molested.
Yes, and you could say, and you could have Celeste say that the teeth are missing from The Office.
Yeah, I mean, Celeste isn't going to do it, but like I said, if he's going to go the way I think he is with the psychologist, it's going to come out. And so the psychologist would have to determine whether or not it's something that she, as a professional, has to move forward with, or if she just doesn't even take notes.
A friend of mine asked me if I would write a sequel, and then another friend of mine told me that I had missed an opportunity by having Wade just not start an affair with the psychologist. And I was like, wait, no, he's not. I'm not going to work my way through every medical profession in like just a series. No, he has to learn something. But then, but I do that, offer that up as a counterpoint, as we do not know exactly how good Wade is going to be at getting better.
Well, yes, I don't expect him to be very good.
Isn't there some sort of privilege that medical professionals, like just like a priest's privilege or something?
I think that she's right that but usually it's if someone is in danger, then
Right.
you have an obligation to break doctor-patient confidentiality. But once someone's I don't know. There's I don't
She would have to
know.
think that he was capable of doing it again.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Or she would I didn't check. I can go check. I'll find out what happens if a psychologist hears someone confess a crime. But that's fascinating.
Well, a priest would be required to encourage the confessor to go to the police and admit his crime. But like I said, I don't know what the standards are for medical professionals. And again, that's going to vary state by state based on state interpretation of ethics. I would expect Georgia to be very different from Connecticut in an instance like that, for example.
Oh, Georgia's different from Connecticut in a lot of instances.
I was trying to think of some ways where it wasn't different, but
yes, Georgia don't care if we live or die. It's
yeah.
Yes.
So
I think for the whether therapists can report a crime, they're not required to report crimes, past crimes that happened in most cases. They're only required to do something like to tell the police if the victim may hurt themselves or others like in the future. But I don't, from what I've read, I don't think they have to report crimes. I think they still can legally, but I don't think they have to.
I was also reminded of This American Life did an episode about a phone line that operated in the 80s and 90s called the confession line, where people could call up and just confess to anything, but it was an anonymous. That was anonymous, and then it was essentially just like answering machine tapes, and like some people said some of the most appalling things, but there's no way to trace it, and there are no names, and there's no way to know.
Wow,
it's just, oh yes, the someone confessed that when they were 3, they were playing with their baby sister, and they were playing with a plastic bag, and they accidentally suffocated their baby sister, then took the bag away, and just his parents thought it was crib death, and he never said anything to anyone except on this phone line. And I was like, what? That's horrible. Anyway,
That's your next book, Benji.
no.
Don't get him off a tangent.
I'm not. I mean, it's interesting. It's just not mine. But anyway.
Hey, Benji.
Yes, sir.
Bernie Demchuk from Washington, D.C.
Hello there.
Hello. Is it more cathartic to write about trauma or to talk about it the way you're doing now? Or is that a 1-2 punch that you need to knock out trauma? Writing and talking about it at the same time?
Talking about it provides more direct comfort to me. Talking about it in therapy, it becomes about you and your relationship with yourself. If you're on stage at a storytelling event like The Moth, which I've done, and you talk about your own personal abuse and your survival and how you're doing in regard to it, that's about you and the audience that you're speaking to, because inevitably there is someone in that audience who has gone through what you are going, who has gone through a variation on what you're going through, who isn't in the place that you are. And it helps to know that you aren't alone, and it helps to know that there are paths forward. Writing about it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. Partly because the conversations that occur between Celeste and her son at the Waffle House, and the number of conversations between Mary and Wade, either at the hospital or over the kitchen table, those were ways to redo conversations that I failed to have with my own parents. I essentially got to create a mother who was more of an avenger than my own mother was. I was able to get Celeste to acknowledge to Marcus that his body was his own, and that his feelings were his own, and that even if you don't mean to, that you could be, that even if Celeste herself didn't mean to, she could be an abuser. And so she's like, no, this belongs to you. Even if I'm the one who hurts you, your body is your own, your feelings are your own, your life is your own, and other people don't have a right to harm it. Because I didn't know at the beginning that this is what I was writing about, when I got to the point where I realized what I wanted to say directly, I was hoping that there was enough of a plot within the book that those moments where it becomes, dare I say, preachier or more directly about the topic of abuse, that I had somehow built up enough of a Trojan horse around it, so that once I finally wheeled it into the reader's house, that by the time the secret message comes out, that they're already willing to have it there. So speaking about it in therapy is perhaps the best thing that you can do for yourself. Speaking about it with other survivors is very good because it makes it not just about you, and it also hopefully brings down the walls that we have about the topic and things that we're allowed to talk about in polite conversation. And then writing about it was difficult, but I hope I did okay. I don't know. Thank you for the question.
Good answer, Benji. Very good answer.
Thank you.
All right. We usually wrap up around
But we're already past 8. I'm kind of fascinated to just keep going, but I think
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
we've got
fine.
to let other
It's
people
fine.
get on with their evenings.
I mean, we have the questions that I wrote, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Oh, yeah.
that-
Let's do a few of those before we end tonight.
Yeah. I mean, there were questions that I had for readers, basically. So, yes.
So I'll pick a random one. So did you guys think that Wade, like, would you say is Wade likable, or did you think he was a total idiot?
Idiot.
Can he be both? I mean, he's
Oh, yeah.
he's he's a teenager. Any of us who has been a teenager, and I think that would be all of us, we know that you can be an idiot and still be likable at the same time. He was confused, very confused boy. And yet he had moments of great responsibility. He had his job. He went to school and then he went and he worked until late at night because he had some, and I mean, Benji, you said he was a terrible father, but he loved his little girl. He loved that baby. And he had some very, very lovable features. Again, as a mom, I was very touched by the scenes where he sits and talks to his mother, which is something that as a recovering teenager, I rarely did with my mother. That there was a special bond there, and I thought there was a lot. I was rooting for him throughout. He screwed up, but who doesn't sometimes?
The reason that I call him a terrible father was only just in terms of the way in which he conducts this affair is by leaving his mother and Jessa to primarily be the people who are taking care of Liddy. And to me, that was the fact that they would allow him to do that. But beyond that, the fact that he wouldn't take it on himself, like he just seemed very checked out. And
but that's what guys do. I mean, that's fairly typical for.
Yeah, but it does not make it all right.
No, it doesn't. But it's.
I mean, a great exception with what you just said.
I didn't say all men, but to me that was not a startling aspect of his personality. That just seemed very, very credible, because that's what I think most. I thought he was more engaged with his baby than most unmarried teenage boys would have been.
Here's another good one. Did you think that Wade was justified in what he did to Dr. Emmett in the first chapter?
Well, you are asking people to justify murder, so I'm not sure.
I saw it as a crime of passion. I don't think that justification fits into it. I feel like something should have happened to the doctor but whether it should be that he dies or not, I think that's the easy way out for a person like that. I don't feel like Wade ever made any decision. He didn't make a decision to be a father. He didn't make a decision through for anything, you know. He just fell into these situations, and that was just emotion.
That scene at the beginning is my go-to scene to read to people when I'm presenting the book, because the just absolute audacity and frustration, like wait, you don't have anywhere to be, all you do is just waste time, and then to realize that you've been kept waiting outside for 2 to 3 hours because of a couch delivery.
Exactly.
And like, just like, Dr. Emmett, who the hell do you think you are? And I don't know. I've been that mad at people. I would never. Well, first of all, they don't really make those kind of ceramic models anymore, do they? But
That's what saved me.
yes.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question.
All right. So how about this one? Is exploitation and abuse always black and white, or is there a possibility that situations are more murky than that?
I already know the answer to these questions as I ask them. They're
Well,
badly phrased.
I think it's murky, but that was one of the things I found really interesting, was that Wade really did derive sexual pleasure from the abuse that he was undergoing. In fact, it may have been that abuse that helped Wade to realize he was gay. Maybe this would not have, it would have taken him 20 more years of trying to figure out who or what he was and what he wanted. So, I mean, I did not think he whacked the dentist over the head because the dentist had been abusing him. I think he whacked him because he was jealous and he wanted to be the dentist's boyfriend. And to me, that was just fascinating aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's because, in many cases of abuse, the victim just hates the abuser. Here, I don't think he hated the dentist. He wanted more from the dentist. He wanted the dentist's love. He believed he had the dentist's love, and he was responding to the realization that the dentist didn't love him. It was jealousy and not being heard as a victim. So I thought that was a fascinating aspect of it.
I have a question that I think might be interesting for people. At what point do you think Wade realized that what was going on between him and the dentist wasn't romantic and was abuse?
Never.
I don't know that he did.
Yeah, I don't think he ever does.
Well, so you don't think he realized it after the fact?
I think therapy, when he starts seeing the therapist, I think he would start realizing it at that point, maybe.
Yeah.
Talking it through, having an adult who explains to him, no, this is really what happened. You did not perceive it as what it really was. And I mean, Celeste might have also led him in that direction, since she was aware of the dentist's abuse of other people.
Well, but remember his reaction to it at the point where his mother seems to take the narrative of the relationship away from Wade. Wade is like, no, I was there. I made these choices. I knew this. And you know what? And then he goes, you want to know how responsible I am for all of what happened? I hit him over the head with the teeth. Like he's so, that to me was key. In regard to my own situations, like just other people who aren't there telling me that I'm just thinking of it the wrong way. Or like even afterward, as I came out of the closet in my 20s and would meet other people, I would tell them what happened to me as though it were some sort of horribly traumatic incident, which is how I felt that it was. And they were like, well, no, you're just not thinking about it the right way. I'm not thinking about my own situation the right way that I was there for and present for. So I'm not sure that Wade ever he'll come to accept it eventually, but over the course of the narrative, I don't know that he's ever he's not ready to villainize the person that did this to him. Like even in the hospital room, as he's having a conversation with the comatose man, he's like, oh my God, you're my only gay friend. Like, it's because these things are complicated. There's desire in addition to law, in addition to like physical sensation, in addition to just exploitation. It gets really, really complicated, and it's all gray area. It isn't right, and it happens far too often. But I don't think that Mary, in coming along and telling Wade that he was abused, entirely understands what she's taking away from him by doing that. I think that the therapist probably will have a different approach and potentially better luck.
Yeah, I would say so.
Thank you
That was a
so
great
much for
answer.
having this conversation. No, thank you so much for having this conversation. It's just,
Now, this is, one of the reasons I love publishing fiction is because, when a writer is really writing, there's endless amounts to talk about. And that may be truer with this novel than many, but it is one of the true joys of being involved in a literary field is that the conversations can go on forever.
thank you very much.
We have to end the evening tonight.
Thank you so much, Benji.
We can't go on forever.
Thank you all.
This was
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks a bunch.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.